I'm Duncan McLeod, and this is the TechCentral Show. Subscribe at youtube.com/TechCentral and never miss another episode. Now, Maurice van Heerden is director at Planetworld, audio specialist that represents some of the world's top audio brands. Maurice, it's great to see you in the studio. Thanks for coming through.
Cheers. Thanks for doing this. Yeah.
Great. So, Maurice, there are actually four of you that kind of started this business, and you're all brothers, the Van Heerden brothers. What was the background? What is the background of the four of you, and how did you end up in business together?
Well, it's not often that you find four brothers that turn out to be good mates and involved in business together.
No, it's very unusual.
And socialize together regularly. We grew up in a close home. We're all quite close in age, so 2 years apart, pretty much, between all of us. And we were all drifting in different careers, doing different things. I was a school teacher in the UK.
Oh, wow.
A dismal school teacher.
Teaching what?
Sports science.
Okay.
So I had aspirations to drink heavily, travel, and coach some rugby. And I ended up teaching at a school in Croydon, which is
wow.
I think the year I was there, it was voted the chaviest town in all of the United Kingdom. So that was fun. So I was doing that, and my other brother was working in sales, and we were kind of all over the place,
right?
But had aspirations of doing something together. My dad was quite entrepreneurial, and he'd been involved in a few entrepreneurial endeavors, actually only after his 50s. You know, he worked in the corporate world until then. And my one brother was working for this company called Planet Electronics, for a guy called John Planets, obviously where the name comes from.
I was wondering where the name came from.
And which still sits with us today. Yeah. But and it was a small distributor of electronic components in the automotive trade.
Okay.
And I was actually sitting at a pub one night, and my brother phoned me and he said, "Listen, this guy wants to sell." This was in 2008 or late 2007, just prior to the financial crisis. It was all just kind of starting to happen. And he was a Greek guy, and he wanted to sell and move to Greece, which in hindsight was not a great idea, considering what happened to Greece after that. But my brother called me and he said, there's this business, it's for sale. I think we could do something really cool with it. And Dad's keen, and my brother Guy's keen, and we're all going to jump in, and we're going to do spin-off businesses from it. And I'd actually just signed at the school to stay permanently, because I was actually just there for 2 years while I had a visa. So I just applied for my permanent residency. And he caught me while I was vulnerable. I'd had a few beers, and I said, "Okay, I'm in." And I quit my job, which the headmaster wasn't too happy about, and then came back, and that's how it started. But it was pretty humble in the beginning.
Yeah.
It was a small business. I think we had 5 or 6 employees, and my eldest brother Guy had just started an airport shuttle business. So we operated both businesses out of a small office park, which is not much bigger than your studio, which included our stock room. And that's how we started. And today the airport shuttle business is Easy Shuttle, which is by far the largest airport shuttle service in the country. And Planet Electronics since became Planetworld, which is where it is today.
Why Planetworld?
I wish I had a really good answer, clever answer for you. But when we bought the business, the URL address was Planetworld.
Okay.
But the company was called Planet Electronics. And in 2018, we bought a company called Audiotronic. And this whole thing was, the names were getting messy. And so we went through a rebranding exercise, and we kind of did some market research, and we said, well, what do people know us as? What do people call us? And it turned out to be Planetworld. And we already own the URL. So that was useful. And so we changed it to Planetworld. It kind of stuck. Yeah. And that's what it'll be from now on. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you're very close to your other brothers, and that's helped you into business together. But in business, there are always disagreements and differences over strategy and that sort of thing. How do you handle that as a family?
We arm wrestle, and I almost always win. No. We, you're right. I mean, there are times when we have a very different approach on how to handle something. As it so happened, my eldest brother and third eldest brother, I'm the youngest of the four.
Okay.
ended up working really, really well together. So my eldest brother was kind of more of a, really strong leader, really strategic. And so he kind of just assumed that role in Easy Shuttle. And then Cole is just like an operational genius. He if there's anyone that can get 200 drivers to work cohesively and and keep them motivated and so on, it's him. And so it just kind of naturally happened that the two of them ended up focusing on Easy Shuttle. And with Rainer and I, as the business grew and grew and grew, it kind of happened in the same way. I sort of stepped into the more strategic kind of leadership role, and Rainer's a very analytical guy. He should have been an engineer, but he's not. But he really should have been. He's really a details guy. So he buckled down on the parts of the business that required that. I'm not a details person at all, and so my my natural inclination was to step into more of a kind of strategic and leadership role. And so I guess because there's no power struggle between us, it works great. It just flows. It works great. But there are times when there's conflict, and we normally just grab a glass of wine or a few beers and sit down and swear at each other a few times and have our disagreement, and we always come out the other side, usually with a clear vision ahead of us. But I couldn't think of better strategic partners to have. Right. We can be brutally honest with each other, and we learn from each other, and I think we all appreciate each other's input in the business. So it's great.
So some, if not all of you, didn't really have a background in business. I think some of you were toying with some stuff, but you were a teacher. Yeah. Suddenly you're going to running a business. It's a very different proposition. Did you just learn the ropes doing, or 100%. Do you have a business background?
Doing. No business background. We, like you say, hit the ground running. Rainer and I, we put stock in the boot of our car, and we drove. I had an old 4.4 smart car that had 187,000 kilometers on the clock when I got it. My starting salary was 7,000 Rand a month. And I packed my boot full of stock, and we drove around and tried to get rid of it. And that's how we learnt. We learnt on the road and engaging with customers. And I think fundamentally one of the big turning points for us was we started doing this brand of infotainment systems for cars. And this was in 2008 when cars didn't have infotainment systems. If you were lucky, you had a Bluetooth in your car.
There was no such thing as Android Auto and Apple CarPlay.
None of that existed, right? So you had touchscreen didn't really exist. And so we went to a trade fair in Hong Kong, and like in the back aisle, I don't know, row F, block 34, there was a little booth, and they had these touchscreen radios. And we imported 10, which was a massive financial commitment for us at the time. Like could sink us as a business, right. And we sold all 10 in the first day because this was such a new technology. And then we got 50, and then we got 100, and we were selling these things hand over fist. But then they started coming back, and they started coming back as fast as we could send them out. Dear. And that was probably, I would say, the biggest learning curve was, how to cope under that and still deliver great customer service and kind of put the customer at the forefront of everything that you do. Because, the reality is you're going to have product failures, you're going to have operational failures, these things are going to happen. But if you communicate well with your customer, if you, keep them up to speed with where you are in the process of fixing their issue, if you ensure that they always front and center of how you deliver your service, then generally you'll come out on top. And so we've had a few of those disasters happen over the years, but we've always dealt with them well, and we've always focused on the customer experience. I mean, right down to the detail. If you come to our office and we've got speakers in the gardens, in the parking area, and it's very intentional because we want when you arrive there, our whole slogan is life amplified. When we want you to arrive and be surprised by this incredible sound that's coming out of, behind the shrubs and the trees. So we think about customer experience in everything that we do, and it started there. Yeah. So how many brands did Planet Electronics represent when you bought them compared to the number of brands you're representing today? So two. Yeah. Neither of which we represent today.
Okay.
So we had a Bluetooth replacement kit, which was called creatively Mr. Bluetooth.
Okay.
And then we had a third parking sensor replacement, which was really 80% of the business at the time, called Third Eye. Actually, we still do a bit of Third Eye, to be honest with you, not much, but we still do a bit of it. Today, the group's got well over 60 brands in total. We have some in-house brands where we do the product development and we do quality control and we go and inspect factories and order and brand them ourselves.
Okay.
We've got 4 or 5 of those.
What is that brand?
One Nav is by far the biggest one, and it's all based on this premise of one. So we've got One Nav, One X, One Audio, which have been around now for 5 or 6 years and still a big profit driver for us in the
Are
business.
they made in South Africa or contract manufactured in China?
Contract manufactured in China, yeah. Okay. So we do all of the development here. So, I mean, essentially we'll get a white label product and then we'll modify it, to the spec that we want. And that's the portfolio that Reno looks after. And we'll bring it up to spec for South African customers and implement changes in the user interface and implement some hardware changes. And then we do, around 60 global brands which operate across the industries that we play in.
Okay. But you're a distributor, right? You don't service the end user retail market. You distribute to retailers,
correct,
to value-added resellers and that sort of market, right?
Yeah. So we operate in a few different industries. Automotive. We operate in musical instruments. Well, now in musical instruments. The home space, and then Pro AV or Pro Audio, which is kind of large format houses of worship, stadiums, that sort of thing.
Right.
And in all those instances, our responsibility is to import the right product and match it to the requirements in the market. And secondly, to supply it to a range of resellers that are well trained, that are educated about the products, that have a solid client base to which to sell the products. And so we deal with about 1,500 of those around South Africa. And then we also have small operations in Namibia and Botswana, and so on. Much smaller.
How many people do you employ today?
It's about 160.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's huge.
About 160. Well, a year ago it was 70. So it's been a busy year.
That's more than doubling in 12 months.
Yes. This line in my hairline was there a year ago, and it's now here. No, we acquired Tom's Sound and Music, and with that came quite a lot of people and a lot of new brands, and we operate in 2 new industries. So it's been a very, very busy, productive, but also successful year.
I think many South Africans know the brand Tom's as a retail store where you can buy musical instruments and podcasting gear and all that sort of thing. Yeah. But you bought Tom's for a different reason, not for the retail stores. You bought them because they're a distributor of certain products.
Correct. So Tom's had 3 divisions. It had Tom's, the retail stores, and which we don't own. We spun those out and sold them to somebody else.
So you bought them and then sold them?
Correct.
Okay.
We then they then had a company called Wild and Mar, which was a division of Tom's.
Okay.
And Wild and Mar was the importer of stuff like Shure microphones, JBL Professional, which is all the kind of outdoor speakers and large format PA. And then they had a company called MIDI Music, which was an importer of musical instruments. And so, I wish I could tell you that this was our strategy from day one back in 2008. It really wasn't. At that stage, we were just trying to make a living. But as we started distributing musical instruments, or not products in the music industry, speakers and that sort of thing, it really became clear to us that what we wanted to do was, we come from a musical family. Music plays an enormous role in our lives and our families' lives. And so it became clear that we wanted to be part of the musical journey, and how that's kind of manifested itself over time through the right place and the right time and some luck and the right opportunities, is that from the moment an artist has an idea about a piece of music, they then grab their instrument, which hopefully we've imported and distributed to a retailer from where they bought it. They create the piece of music. It then gets recorded in a studio that's full of our mixers and microphones and equipment. Goes into a post-production studio, which we're responsible for bringing that equipment in, and then it reaches the consumer's ears, which hopefully, whether it's in their car, or their home, or in their office, or at their church, or in a stadium, we've supplied the speakers, so we kind of amplify every step of that journey, and that's That's the mission that we're on. Yeah, literally. Yeah. Hence the slogan "Life Amplified." You know.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the mission that we're on.
And then a couple of years ago, Tom's hasn't been your only acquisition. You also made an acquisition in 2017 of a business called Audiotronic. What did they do?
So we were only operating in automotive or car audio and automotive accessories until then. And I'd seen Sonos in the UK through a friend in 2017. And I was just blown away. I knew, within a minute of kind of using the app and seeing how it all works together and seeing how you can build out the ecosystem, that this was the future of music, which in America and Europe and so on, it was already dominating market share. But I'd never heard of it in South Africa, and everybody I knew had never heard of it. So I desperately tried to get the distribution, and I in fact went to go see the owner of Audiotronic, who was the distributor.
Okay.
And I said, I really want to take over the Sonos distribution, and he had a prized 4-letter word for me, followed by off. And but I didn't give up, and I'm very lucky. I had a friend who was actually a shareholder in the business. And we ended up buying the company in 2018, and that was where we started to expand beyond automotive.
Right.
And Audiotronic distributed Sonos, Onkyo, and a speaker brand called Dali. So that was where our sort of a journey into home audio started.
Okay. And what's the mix now compared to car audio and home and professional audio? What's the revenue split?
They fight neck and neck. Hey? Okay. So they're pretty close. So car was always way bigger.
Yeah.
But, one of the things that we've found in all of the industries that we've got involved in, and it's been pretty consistent, and I don't think that we would get involved if it was any other way, is that typically what we've always found is that there are 7 or 8 distributors in the space. Most of them are owner-run. Mm-hmm. Most of the owners have been doing it for 30 or 40 years. They kind of all know each other, and it's an old boys club, and they've got their unwritten rules that they all kind of stick to, and nobody touches each other's brands. And so we disruptors. We basically find an opportunity to come in, consolidate the whole market. We bring cutting edge technology, cutting edge service, and the client base that these distributors sell to are mesmerized by what we can offer them in terms of service and backup and support and speed and technology. That within a year, every single one of those distributors is for sale. So we typically consolidate them pretty quickly, and that's what we did in home. So we actually did 3 acquisitions in home, and we really we could kind of pick and choose how we wanted our portfolio to look, and that's what we did. So we consolidated. I thought it would take 5 years, and it took us 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you represent a wide range of brands now. How many in total, roughly, you said?
About 60.
About 60. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And one of them is Shure. You were very kind enough to bring in these 2 microphones. What's the model number? MK7?
MV7.
MV7.
Yeah.
These are specifically designed for podcast studios.
Correct,
right?
Yeah.
Okay. And Shure is a big player in that space. What are the biggest brands in your stable now? I imagine Sonos is probably number 1. Is that right?
Yeah. By revenue, Sonos is our biggest. Yeah. So when we took over Sonos, it was very small, very, very small. They sold maybe between 500 and 800 pieces per year.
All right.
We do about 35,000 now, 40,000, yeah.
Wow.
And growing every year by kind of 30, 40%.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Despite the economy.
Despite it's one of those kind of Apple-esque products that just people want it. A
lot of people refer to it as the Apple of music.
Yeah,
the Apple of speakers.
It really is. It's the products are beautiful. They work well. The quality is fantastic. The brand is really strong. It's a brand that people want to be part of. And once you use it, obviously I get, when you have an audio distribution business, you get a lot of friends, of guys that want.
And you get to play with a lot of tech as well. Yeah.
And Sonos remains my number 1 recommended product to friends and family because it's easy to use. It's great quality. It's scalable, and you can build it up into your ecosystem as you want.
What I like about Sonos is it takes the complexity out of home audio. In the past, you'd probably spend half a weekend wiring up a new audio system to an amp and speakers and all the rest of it.
It was for audio nerds, It was like, you really had to be a bit of an audio nerd to get a receiver, and then
Yeah.
then you'd have these floor standing speakers. And I mean, we still sell those, but in 2018, that was the majority of Audiotronic's business. It's now a very small minority.
Interesting.
Very, very small.
Yeah.
You still get your audio heads that, your audio files that prefer a receiver and
Sure.
prefer kind of time aligning it.
But I'm sure there are audio
themselves.
files that go Sonos too.
What I would love to do, I'm yet to do it, but is to because audiophiles are like food critics.
Mm-hmm.
They listen to a piece of music not to enjoy the music, but to criticize the speakers. I've always wanted to blindfold them and then put them in front of like a good normal setup and then a Sonos setup, because in my house I've only got Sonos, and
Mm-hmm.
I've got the privilege of being able to kind of do anything I want
Yeah.
as far as audio goes, and it really it's just a fantastic.
Be honest, how many Sonos speakers do you have in your house? You have to count.
A few. It's over 10.
Over 10, wow.
It's over 10. And I don't have that many rooms. It's just, it's kind of there's not a single corner of my house that doesn't have sound
Yeah.
permeating through
Yeah.
it at some point or another.
Well, we actually have an exercise for our viewers and listeners this week. We're using these instead of our usual lapel mics this week. So drop us a mail or leave a comment under the YouTube video or on TechCentral as to what you think of the audio quality of these microphones. We'd be keen to hear your views. Should we be using these instead of our lapel mics? Tell us what you think. info@techcentral.co.za is the address.
There's only one
to
answer
use.
to that question. It's yes.
Right. I mean, we've touched on the state of the economy, but you say Sonos is still booming. We know that South Africans are under pressure in the current economic climate. You tend to sell products into a more sort of the high end of the market. Is that segment, which I presume is sort of LSM 8 and higher, still able to afford? Does it have the discretionary spend to buy the products that you're selling? So are you perhaps, I guess the question I'm asking is, are you perhaps a little more insulated from the vagaries of the South African economy?
No, to be honest with you. So, I mean, it depends on your outlook. So we do sell to the higher end of the market, and I think typically the space where we promote and market and sell our products aren't necessarily that financially affected by changes in interest rates or things like load shedding. They might have a minor impact on them, but I don't think that their money all of a sudden disappears and they can't afford to buy stuff. But what does change is sentiment, right?
Sure.
And I think when sentiment's negative, then automatically people become a little bit more restrictive with their spend on luxury goods and so on. That being said, our internal message is just, we don't talk about it much, to be honest, because it's not something that we can change or we can impact change on. What we can change is our attitude, and what we can change is how aggressive we are in the market and how we approach our customers, and and really focus on customer needs. And so that's what we do. We try not to get sucked into all the negativity, because it's really out of our control. And it doesn't, no good comes from it, really. So we just focus on what we can do well. And we really focus on strategy of the different brands, and we develop brand strategies for each one of them.
Yeah.
Which we implement, and we're seeing some areas. I mean, there are silver linings, because the corporates obviously know something that we don't, because they're spending money like crazy on video conferencing equipment and redoing office buildings, and we're selling more video conferencing equipment than you could ever imagine right now.
Interesting.
Which is all the big corporates that are investing money
Because of hybrid work and
exactly.
sort of aftermath of COVID.
Well, and I think people are now coming back into the office, and there's a huge focus on video conferencing. A massive focus.
Yeah.
So there we're really strong. We're very, very strong musical instruments. There we've performed really, really well. So that side of the business is going great. Our home division continues to grow. Automotive is under a bit of pressure.
Okay.
We don't really have much market share to churn out there, because we're very dominant in that space. But everywhere else, there's, if the market gets a bit smaller, I don't get too worried, because there's, as long as there's competition, there's market share to grab. So we just focus on that. Yeah.
When there are no competitors left, then you start to worry.
Yes, yeah. Then I'll retire.
Okay. I'm interested in the audio, the car audio market. It's not something I look at closely, and certainly not something I've looked at in many decades. I think the last time I actually installed an audio solution in my car was in the days of cassette tapes.
Yeah.
That market, what are consumers buying there? I mean, imagine that you know, if you wanted to, you could really spec up quite a hell of a system for your car.
Yeah.
What's available in the market? What are guys buying?
So it's definitely shifted in the last 10 years, whereas before, or probably 15 years, whereas before you would see real enthusiasts spending big money on custom car installations. That's very slow. You know, I think that car manufacturers produce cars with pretty good sound now, you know, so that's rare. But where we do a hell of a lot of business, you know, you traditionally think of car audio as two 12-inch subwoofers in the boot and a big box and 6x9s.
The whole thing shaking like this.
But we actually don't do much of that. What we do a hell of a lot of is you know, a guy driving a Hilux or a Fortuner or a Ford Ranger or an everyday vehicle where the sound is not great, and for relatively cheap, you can get a really great sounding system in your car. And again, it, you know, and forgive me for overusing the word, but it really amplifies your experience of driving when you have a great sounding system in your car.
That's true.
Yeah, it totally transformed the experience of being stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
When you've got and a car is also a very acoustically easy space to work in. So, you know, by simply replacing 4 speakers, you can already have a really fantastic sounding system that you can bop your head along
integrated into the existing car.
Fully integrated into the existing OEM factory-fitted radio.
Right.
And then you can obviously add subwoofers and things, but they don't make them in these huge boxes. Everything's nice slimline. It slides under your seat. You don't even know it's there.
Okay.
And then you've got, you know, for 10 or 12,000 Rand, you can take what a manufacturer would offer you for 60,000 Rand, you can do for 10 or 12,000 Rand in the aftermarket.
Right.
So that's where we do most of our business. And then the second part is the infotainment systems, which, to be honest with you, I said 8 years ago would die soon, and it's still as strong as ever. Because
for older cars?
Sorry?
For older cars? Or
no, for current cars. So what a lot of manufacturers do in South Africa is that they import the vehicles from India or from Indonesia and because the radio frequencies are different, or because the languages are different, or there's issues with the existing infotainment system that they supply on that side, they import them without those. And then we would approach that manufacturer, or the manufacturer would approach us, and we would develop a solution for that vehicle. And so we've done lots of projects with the likes of Nissan and Isuzu and these guys to have a local solution that's locally supported. You know, we can make the screen fully OEM, that it looks like an Isuzu or a Nissan or a Suzuki piece of equipment, but it's locally supported. You know, if there's an issue with it, it gets locally repaired. And we actually have a team that goes out in the Durban dock onto the boat before they offload the vehicles, and we churn out and fit them there.
Interesting. What are the big brands in car audio?
So there's a few. We do most of them. So there's our portfolio stretches. So we don't do. There's a pocket of very entry level product, which is typically white label sort of product that's imported from China and then labeled locally. We don't really get involved in that space. We start with a brand called JVC,
I know them,
which you'll know well. We then kind of one step higher than that is Kenwood, which you also know, which we do. We then do a brand called Alpine, which is a little bit more premium, you know, mid to high price point, really, really premium. Was very, very big in the 80s, but still quite strong. And then you get to your real enthusiast brands. So one of them is Kicker, which is like an American car audio brand. Kicker, yeah. Great company. And that was the first audio product that we distributed, was Kicker. That's kind of what kickstarted the journey into audio. And that's by far our biggest car audio brand, actually. And then we do a much more refined and much more expensive brand called Focal, which is French. And that's I mean, there you can run into the hundreds of thousands of rands for a car audio system. I mean, they make a single speaker that costs 250,000 rand.
Good grief.
For the pair.
And you've sold a few of these.
You get these guys, these nuts that just they want the biggest and the best. So
what have you put them into as a matter of interest? Mercs?
No, that's the crazy part, eh? The one that comes to mind, we put in an old Subaru.
You're kidding?
Yeah, I think the speakers were worth more than the car was. Yeah. Yeah, there's
Passionate about it.
enthusiasts, passionate,
Yeah.
And then they had to build custom door panels and all. It took about a year to get the system in the guy's car.
Okay.
But look, if they want it, we'll sell it to them, man.
Good. Maurice, you've also got some news to share today. You're launching something called Rockstar Studios this week. What is it exactly? Is it a recording studio? Is it a place for artists to come and mess around? What is it exactly?
Well, it's kind of both. So
Okay.
we when we bought Tom Sound and Music, what we realized is that most of the importers, distributors were very, very focused on promoting their products to rental companies, who are the companies that effectively warehouse the equipment and then rent it out to events and so on. And that was really their single focus. Whereas we're quite passionate, being passionate about music and being passionate about this country, we kind of looked at it from a different perspective. And how do we use this opportunity to try and uplift the local music community? And how do we contribute back to them in some way that makes commercial sense? Mm-hmm. And so we needed to build a space where we could showcase our products in a real kind of live setting. Mm-hmm. So we had to do that anyway. But that doesn't really impact on musicians' lives. That's just in the normal course of business. And so what we did is we actually built a performance theater mm-hmm. at our campus in Kramerville. We converted a little warehouse that we have on the campus, about 420 square meters big. And it's a full-on performance venue, kitted out with the latest and greatest in PA, in microphones, in musical instruments, in guitar amplifiers and bass amplifiers, in drums. And then we have 2 studios. We've got a podcast/radio studio, and then we also have a post-production studio. So we actually had our first band in there last night.
Incredible. This is all at your office in Sandton?
Yeah. And you'll see it at the launch. So we had our first band in the space last night. It's a band called Rubber Duck, which is a great local act. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very cool guys. And it was just incredible to because they're playing. In their case, they may have played on it before, but for many of the musicians that'll come through there, it'd be the first time they're ever playing on, really the very best equipment that you can. And so really what the aspiration is a couple of fold. Obviously, there's the commercial element of showcasing our product, but 2 is to really engage and educate South African musicians about best practices on microphones, best practices on guitars, best practices on drums, and educating them how to make clever choices. And then obviously allowing them to use the facility to rehearse, to record, to post down their raw recordings, and they can take it off and mix it later. Mm-hmm. Really kind of weave our way into the fabric of the South African music industry. That's essentially what we're trying to do with the space.
Fantastic. Now, before I let you go, actually your offices in Sandton, while we're talking about that, have a whole bunch of demo areas. In fact, you walk in there, it looks like you're walking into a house, more than an office park. You've got sort of TV lounges, I guess I'd call them, and a bed and bedrooms and also some living spaces, kitchens, where you demo your products. Can the public walk in there and go and check it out, or is it only for your distribution partners?
No, so the public can come anytime, and we took the approach of a showroom quite differently. I think normally audio showrooms are quite stale and bright and not really reflective of what you experience in your own home. So we effectively built a 700 square meter showroom that represents different scenes in a home. So whether they be lounges or bedrooms or dining rooms or studies, and we filled it with beautiful furniture, all South African design furniture that was all made in South Africa, designed by local South Africans. And so it's a platform for them to showcase their product, and we essentially adapt our product to the design, which is what you do in your home. It's very rare you find somebody whose first piece of furniture or equipment they put in their house are the speakers, and they build the furniture around that, right? So we just took a natural approach, and typically the furniture comes in first, and then you may design an audio system or an automation system or a home cinema system, or you design it around that. And so that's what we did. The public are welcome to come anytime. We're open normal trading hours. We even open on Saturdays. So we welcome the public to come in.
Okay, good stuff.
And we'll offer advice, and we'll direct you in the right direction of working with an integrator who can actually install the products for you. But we don't sell directly to the public.
Sure. Well, go check them out. You're in Kramerville, which is on the eastern side of Sandton, I guess quite near to the N1.
17 Commerce Crescent, yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Full address. Go check it out. And let us know what you think of these Shure microphones. info@techcentral.co.za. We'd love to hear your views, and we'll use them for our next few shows. And we'd love to hear your feedback on what you think of the audio quality, just bearing in mind, of course, that YouTube and the other distribution platforms compress the audio, so it's not the raw output, but you should still hopefully be able to hear the difference. Fantastic talking to you. Maurice van Heerden is director at Planetworld. Thanks for making the time to talk to Tech Central.
Thank you. Pleasure.